It's not just the Israeli war in Gaza that is starting to unravel out of control. And it's not just the high possibility of further escalation. The United States is already involved in the Middle East in multiple ways because of Israel, including bombing alleged Iranian targets in Iraq and Syria, as well as bombing targets in Yemen as retaliation for the Houthis targeting commercial shipping to retaliate against the Israeli attack on Gaza. The United States is involved in multiple ways in the Middle East since October 7th, as well as funding the Israeli war and providing them with the weapons. But Israel seems increasingly willing to deviate from every standard, to defy every limit, to trespass every ethical line, essentially in order to demonstrate that they're unconstrained entirely, that nothing can limit what the Israelis do. And the fact that the United States government and many factions within the United States and the West more broadly continue to defend everything Israel does, even when, as happened yesterday, the Israelis kill an innocent citizen of the United States, an American citizen, using American weapons to do it in ways that are blatantly unjustified, that have sparked rage throughout the world, including the countries that have stood by Israel most closely. Even when the Israelis kill our own citizens, it seems like our government is willing to justify and excuse everything that they do and continue to pledge further support. Now, yesterday we went over just how extreme of an act it was for the Israelis to target the Iranian embassy in Damascus. In general, countries, virtually without limits, respect the inviolability of embassies, if for no other reason than they're central to the way that countries protect themselves. If the Iranian embassy in Damascus is now fair game, then obviously Israeli embassies around the world, American embassies, would be as well. And that's why it's almost impossible to find examples, even extreme ones, where countries really wanted to invade embassies and yet chose not to. And yet the Israelis blew past all of the conventions, like the Vienna Convention, that make embassies sacrosanct, part of the foreign soil of those countries whose embassy it is, and bombed the Iranian embassy in Syria, almost forcing the Iranians to retaliate in a way that brings serious risk of escalation, not just for Israel, but for the United States as well. But the act that has really turned even parts of the world that have been willing to overlook what the Israelis were doing in terms of using mass starvation and famine as a weapon of war in Gaza, have turned a lot of people, if not entirely against Israel, certainly angrier at Tel Aviv than they've ever been, which was this attack on an aid convoy from the World Central Kitchen. And even the version given by the IDF is reprehensible. Even if you believe everything the Israeli military is saying about what happened here, it is morally and legally reprehensible. Here from Haaretz, the Israeli daily newspaper that have a lot of sources inside the Israeli government, from April 2nd, which is today, the IDF drone bombed the World Central Kitchen aid convoy 3 times, targeting an armed Hamas member who wasn't there. So that's the Israeli excuse, that they knew they were bombing a convoy of aid workers from the World Central Kitchen, which the Israelis say are free to operate in Gaza, are welcomed in Gaza. They knew they were bombing that convoy. They're not pretending they thought this was a Hamas convoy. But their argument was, well, the reason we did it is because we thought, mistakenly as it turns out, that among the 7 workers was a single armed militant from Hamas, and therefore we decided to kill them all 7 of them, just to kill this one armed Hamas operative, who wasn't there. But even if he were, how would that be justification for extinguishing the lives of 7 international aid workers in Gaza with the Israeli permission to feed the starving civilians there? Quote, the strike on the aid convoy, which traveled along a route approved by the Israeli army, killed 7 workers of the World Central Kitchen, but the target, an armed man thought to be a terrorist, never left the warehouse with the cars. Now, again, if I were an aid worker in Gaza, given the anarchy in Gaza that has been brought about by the destruction of civilian life and infrastructure in Gaza, I would probably want somebody armed accompanying me. But even if they had taken an armed person, even one associated with Hamas, how in the world would that justify, from any moral perspective or legal perspective of war, killing everyone in that vicinity? Yet that's exactly what they did on purpose. Quote, the Israeli strike that killed 7 World Central Kitchen aid workers in the Gaza Strip on Monday night was launched because of suspicion that a terrorist was traveling with the convoy. According to the defense sources, the cars were clearly marked on the roof and side as belonging to the organization. Again, this is according to the IDF. They're admitting that the cars were clearly marked as belonging to this organization that is founded by the celebrity chef Jose Andres, who actually came out and supported the Israeli war in Gaza in the beginning, and now has decided that his organization, which works in war zones, needs to feed the people in Gaza, and he's worked with the Israeli military to be able to operate there. And the Israeli military is admitting that they knew this was an aid convoy and yet destroyed it anyway. Quote, the war room, or the unit responsible for security of the route that the convoy traveled, identified an armed man on the truck and suspected that he was a terrorist. At some point when the convoy was driving along the approved route, the war room of the unit responsible for security of the route ordered the drone operators to attack one of the cars with a missile. Some of the passengers were seen leaving the car after it was hit and switching to one of the other 2 cars. They continued to drive and even notified the people responsible that they were attacked, but seconds later, another missile hit their car. The 3rd car in the convoy approached, and the passengers began to transfer to it the wounded who had survived the 2nd strike in order to get them out of danger. But then a 3rd missile struck them. All 7 World Central Kitchen volunteers were killed in the strike. Think how systematic and deliberate that was. They knew this was a convoy traveling on a route that the IDF had approved. When they hit the first car of the World Health Kitchen, the drivers in the car, the people in the car, the volunteers, called the Israeli military, their contacts in the IDF, and said, that missile just attacked our convoy. And despite that, when they moved to the 2nd car, the IDF then targeted that 2nd car and struck it, killing some of the people. The ones who were wounded tried to scramble into the 3rd car to get into safety, and once they got there, the IDF then targeted the 3rd car and killed them all. 3 of the people killed were British nationals. 1 was an American citizen. You would think the U.S. government would be enraged that one of its own citizens, an innocent person, by even the IDF's acknowledgement, was killed using weapons and munitions and drones and bombs paid for by the American government, possibly supplied by the American government itself. And it's not the first time the Israelis have killed innocent Americans over the last year. They killed an American journalist in Gaza last year before October 7th. They killed an American teenager in the West Bank. Within the last 2 months, now they've killed an American aid worker trying to deliver food to the people of Gaza. And yet the White House, the Biden White House, when asked about this today, did everything possible to defend the Israelis, saying that there's no evidence they violated any laws of war. There's no evidence they violated any human rights limitations. And they repeated their refusal to put any limits of any kind on what Israel can do as the United States continues to pay for its war and to provide it with the weapons that it uses. This is a war that the United States is every bit as much responsible for as Israel, because the U.S. refuses even to put any limits on the Israelis of any kind. In fact, yesterday, as CNN reported, the Biden administration is set to greenlight an $18 billion sale of more F-15 fighter jets to Israel. Remember, we reported a couple of weeks ago that the Biden administration told the Netanyahu government that attacking Rafah, the refugee camp where most Palestinians are now taking refuge, is a, quote, red line that the United States would not tolerate. And the Israelis said, we don't care about your red lines, we're going to do it anyway. And the U.S. response was then to turn around and sell a massive amount of F-15 fighter jets to the Israelis. Quote, the Biden administration is close to approving the sale of as many 50 American-made F-15 fighter jets to Israel, and a deal expected to be worth more than $18 billion, according to 3 people familiar with the matter. The transaction would amount to the largest U.S. foreign military sale to Israel since the country went to war on October 7th with Hamas, and comes as the administration is also expected to notify Congress soon of a large new sale of precision-guided munition kits to Israel. The new sales of some of the U.S.'s most sophisticated weaponry underscores the extent to which the U.S. continues to support Israel militarily, even as Biden administration officials criticize Israel's operations in Gaza, which have killed more than 32,000 Palestinians since October, according to the Gaza Ministry of Health. Now, the U.S. government's position is that number is likely undercounted because it only counts bodies that go through the morgue and not the people buried still underneath the rubble, which is a substantial number of people killed. The situation in Gaza gets worse. Israel's conduct gets worse. The American government ties itself to Israel ever more closely, risking further escalation in the Middle East. And at the same time, the war in Ukraine is still raging on. Remember that? And now the U.S. looks ready to involve itself even further in that war. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.